Good evening and welcome to the Greenfield Public Schools Special School Committee meeting. It's Tuesday, October 27th, 2020, 6 p.m. This meeting is being held fully remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 20. We will start with a roll call. Member Johnson Musad, would you do a roll call for us, please?
Member Karen?
Here.
Vice Chair Ekstrom?
Here.
Member Hollins?
Here.
Secretary Johnson Musad, I'm here. Chair Peretti?
Here.
Member Wall? Mayor Rita Gardner?
Here.
All here except for Member Wall.
Okay, so we do have a quorum. I call the meeting to order at 6:01. And the first item is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of the school committee on Monday, October 14th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Anyone? Who was that?
Katie.
Katie, and a second? Oh gosh, guys, don't all do this at once.
Second.
Lord.
Second.
Member Ekstrom with the second, and any discussion of the minutes?
I'm going to say no.
All right.
Based on the silence, I'll say no.
Let's move to a vote. Member Johnson Musad, please.
Member Karen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom?
Yes.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Secretary Johnson Musad, I'm going to abstain. Chair Peretti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
I don't know what we're voting on. I'm like,
Good night, Member
Approval,
Wall.
sorry.
Minutes.
Approval of the minutes.
oh, yes.
Mayor Rita Gardner? If you voted Mayor Rita Gardner, I didn't hear you.
She's muted. She's
Oh.
waving yes.
She's waving.
Okay, I need a
Oh, yeah.
need
She
an
says yes.
audio on that.
All right, so the minutes are approved. Public comment. What we do for public comment, for those who aren't familiar with our system during the pandemic, we are indicating in the chat that you wish to comment. We'll take those first. If you are on the line and unable to comment in the chat because you're on a phone or whatnot, we will take those second. Member Johnson Musad, do we have anyone indicating they want to comment?
I don't see anything in the chat yet, but I also don't see the chat window itself. There, let me take a look at that. Yep, I don't see any requests for public comment.
All right. So we'll move to anyone who might be on the line on the telephone. Just go ahead and unmute and indicate that you would like to make a public comment. All right, I'm not hearing anyone, so we'll move ahead. If we get an indication in the chat that someone wants to public comment, we'll give a few more minutes. After committee reports, we can go back. We're not trying to skip anyone who might want to comment. All right. Committee reports is our next section. Chair's report. I do not have a report this evening other than getting out of this meeting before 9 o'clock would be awesome. How about
May I ask a question, Chair Peretti?
please?
Just wondering if you have a progress report for us on the, we voted on October 1st for a written determination from a lawyer about our September 12th
I'm
emergency
hoping to get
meeting.
an update on that tomorrow.
Okay, great.
So yes, that's my update. How's that?
Terrific.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. So we can move right to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Harper, I think I saw you're on the line. Do you have a report for us? There she is.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. It's fun getting together like this, isn't it?
It's the best.
It's the best.
Love you guys.
In your packets, you have a lot of information that we're going to go over in various items tonight, so I won't spend too much time in my report. But I do want to share a few updates that came from a call with the Commissioner of Education this afternoon with the superintendents. We do have regular, although a bit sporadic, calls with the Commissioner, and they are useful in having a understanding of where the department is coming from and where sort of sometimes helping us sort of foreshadow the changes coming at the state level and some of the guidance that is coming down the pike. One of the things of note that they're talking about is the change to the COVID metric that was released last week. The way that the state reporting now indicates clusters and cases, as the mayor and others know, now has more specificity to help reflect where the community may be more impacted by long-term residential care facilities, the presence of a jail, universities, other things that are in a community geographically, but may be more specific to a particular group in the community rather than widespread throughout the school community or across the general population. So the COVID reporting has been updated to provide some more specificity around that. And I think that will be helpful to us as we try to move into the remote plus phases of this plan. I know the committee is eager to return students to school, as are those of us in the schools who are very much missing the face-to-face connection with our students and the in-person instruction. And as you'll see later this evening, we've been very hard at work preparing for phase 2 of our plan. We're pleased at the progress getting there so far in phase 1A, which is what we're in. We're expecting some updated guidance on athletics through the Maya Winter Athletics soon, but we don't have an update tonight. We do expect that that will be coming shortly. Many of you are aware of changes statewide in hockey, for example, in the recent weeks. And these, of course, are very difficult for athletes that are very much enjoying their athletics, but also important for health metrics. We're continuing to hear that there will be MCAS this spring, and that there has not been any indication that there will be federal waivers. That's important because our teachers are very hard at work preparing our students as best they can in our remote environment. And we are not getting an indication at this point that there has been any change to that, although there's a possibility of a slight pilot around some modifications to MCAS. I don't anticipate at this point that it will be eliminated altogether unless there was a dramatic change after the election. I want to talk briefly about snow days. We are expecting some weather on Friday. It does not look like it's going to be a big winter snowstorm, but we may see some white flakes falling to the ground. And in the remote setting,
as far as I'm concerned, it's right on time. It's the annual October snowstorm.
There you
right?
go.
The Halloween snowstorm.
Get out the skis and the snowshoes.
Sorry to interrupt. I couldn't resist.
One of the benefits of being in our remote environment is that we will be able to continue instruction unless conditions are such that really roads are impassable. If we had, as we did before, a widespread internet or power outage, obviously that would prevent us from providing remote instruction. We anticipate that on most days with inclement weather, we will proceed with instruction. It will not be a typical snow day in the sense that we can continue providing instruction remotely. There are times that there may be a delay or a cancellation, and those would only be if we had, as I said earlier, widespread interruption to power or internet where our teachers are teaching from, which could be the buildings, the school buildings themselves, or their homes remotely if they're teaching from there, or other conditions that would make it unsafe to go about our remote instructional program. As we move into phased in person, that will be obviously a key consideration as well. But folks should expect that unless they get that lovely 6 a.m. call from me, that remote instruction is on as planned. And I think in closing, I just want to say I'm going to ask folks to remember and to appreciate that our teachers are working harder than I have ever seen. It's maybe not a popular time to thank teachers because parents are also working an extraordinarily, it's just impossible. It's impossible for everyone. It really is. And I want to say that clearly. It's not that we think that this is a cakewalk. And we know that everyone is doing probably more than they feel they can. And we want to thank you. I also really don't want to lose in this that at the Academy of Early Learning, they're taking money out of their pockets to create manipulative supplies, things that will make at-home learning work really well for our youngest learners and delivering those every 2 weeks home, that many of our teachers are bringing books home to students, and that across our district, our teachers are reinventing how they teach. And in most cases, they're working 10, 12 hours a day to do that. And I just wish that across our whole city right now, the teachers could see a standing ovation in the way that we really know that they are giving it their all. Nobody thinks that this is the perfect platform, but it's certainly not for lack of teachers trying. And for all the caregivers and families that are trying to manage everything you are and support your students learning from home, we know that this is a challenge for you too, and we want to thank you. And to our committee members, you're also in a bit of an impossible situation. There are no answers that are good for everyone, and so we appreciate your efforts to try to navigate this. Thanks.
Thank you, Superintendent Harper. That certainly is echoed, I'm sure, by every committee member, your sentiment there. It's so true. The teachers are working extraordinarily hard. The parents are working extraordinarily hard. I now can tell you for sure, though, the subject and the predicate of a sentence 100% of the time. So I'm acing the second grade.
Oh, me too. I got it now.
Oh yeah, we're moving along right along in second grade. Anyone have any comments or questions for the superintendent?
I do, and the mayor's
Member
raising her hand
Johnson-Musad.
as well.
Please go ahead.
I do, and the mayor.
And then the mayor next.
And just a note, it looks like someone looks like Doug S. has figured out how to use the chat. So after this, if we can open up for public comment again, that might be great.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Superintendent Harper, thanks so much. I'm just wondering if you can tell us more about the MCAS. I know Senator Comerford has been an advocate against having the MCAS instituted. So are you saying that the legislative effort to try to not have the MCAS this year has failed and is unlikely to succeed, or where are we? How does what you reported connect with what Senator Comerford and other legislators have been working on?
No, in no way am I commenting on or disparaging the legislative effort. I was sharing the commissioner's update, though, which was that from the department's perspective, they're still planning on administering MCAS at this point based on what the federal government has said, which is that there will be no state level waivers. So if there's, obviously if there's a change to that, the department will adjust from the legislative action if there is any resulting effort. So I just wanted to share that the Department of Education is continuing to share with districts that we should prepare for the MCAS, even if that changes at some future point. And they're continuing to emphasize the need for rigorous instruction, even if you're in a remote environment. And in essence, sort of applauding folks like what is happening in Greenfield, where even in a remote environment, there is a tremendous amount of live instruction and attendance is being taken, and it's quite rigorous.
And I guess I'm confused about the connection with the feds. So if, say, there was a successful legislative effort to not have the MCAS this year, could that have negative consequences for Massachusetts in terms of federal funding, or what would that mean in terms of a waiver from the federal government for MCAS?
I think you have to ask somebody with a bigger crystal ball than I have.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. I guess I have some more learning to do, but I guess, let me pester you a little bit more, but what does it mean about the federal government not offering a waiver? Like, what is the connection between the state MCAS and the federal government?
So as I understand it, Secretary DeVos has the authority to issue or has stated that she's not going to issue state level waivers from the federal No Child Left Behind Act, which is how we end up with an annual testing measure. So this past year, there was a waiver granted because of the extraordinary circumstances and there was no MCAS. Senator Comerford and others have taken up legislation to say there shouldn't be MCAS this spring and in future years as well. But I think at what point those get reconciled, I don't know. I believe the federal government is continuing to say there will be no waiver. And obviously there are legislative efforts underway to address just that.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Everyone
Mayor
go
Wiedegardner.
vote.
Yeah.
Mayor Wiedegardner, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent, for your report and especially for your recognition of everything teachers and parents and other support people are doing. I wholeheartedly give my hand on that. But with regard to Friday in particular and the potential for the S word to land upon us, as well as the future for the winter and any kind of snow reports. I luckily had my weekly conversation, meeting. I have conversations with him all the time, but this is the update meeting on a weekly basis with Marlo and Paul Raskovitz. And just wanted to simply say they are preparing for Friday. They are not necessarily preparing for the snowstorm of the century, but they will be prepared. And I think he would want us to all know that first and foremost, the streets are the most important. Secondly, I know that this has the ability to impact our food, our lunch delivery, our food delivery for those folks. So he will do everything he can to make sure that those roads, that the roads are cleared enough for that to happen. And also the access to pick up the meals is available. Because we did actually, ironically, talk about it today. He did not know I had a school committee meeting this evening, so I'm glad to be able to update you the best I can with regard to that. I do think as important as the delivery of the lunches is in order to get there, you have to have the roads cleared. So I think his priority will be roads first, but by the time they're needed, I think you will be in good shape.
Mm-hmm. Mayor, I wanted to thank you for mentioning the meals and to say the food service director is also working on preparedness in the event of inclement weather. There will be a decision made about meals. That may be a separate decision from the remote learning platform in terms of meal delivery, because there are different layers to that. So we will continue to update the community, but the food service director will be in communication with myself and a decision will be made as timely as possible. And I just want to reassure families that all efforts will be made to provide food service if at all possible. So we will go to the greatest extent possible. If we cannot do food delivery, we might offer it at the buildings as an example. So we believe that food security is of critical importance. And that has really been a terrific track record from our food service team. So thank you for mentioning that, Mayor, and the connection with the DPW and their great work to get the roads cleared. Thanks.
Sure. That's it for me.
All right. Thank you both. Any other questions or discussion for the superintendent from the school committee members? I just have one quick thing. I can't believe we have, we both, the mayor and I both have questions about snow day stuff. So, and I've always wanted to have the job where I get to call a snow day for something, and I'm so close right now that this is super exciting. But here's my question, because I don't really know where this all comes from. Do we have a school district or school committee policy on canceling on snow days or cancellations or what have you, and does it need to be updated for remote instruction?
We do have a policy, and it could be updated. They can always be updated. What I would recommend is that we first continue the process that we're going through and finalize with the association to make sure that we have kind of crossed
Sure.
off as well. And if there are any members of the committee that have suggestions to that policy, that could certainly go to the policy subcommittee for review and updating. But it's fairly broad, and it does allow the superintendent some discretion in the event of inclement weather. And it also has provisions that allow, if something is isolated to a particular building, for example, for the rest of the operations of the district to continue as much as possible. So it's very consistent with what I was just sharing about food services.
Sure.
And maintaining, even maintaining remote instruction. So
Okay,
we're
awesome.
adapting existing language, as it were.
Yeah, I definitely saw Member Holland's smile when I brought up changing policy. So we're making some good headway tonight, aren't we? All right. Any further questions for the superintendent? Okay, so we will go on to subcommittee reports. Who's got a subcommittee report? I don't know if we have any.
Honestly, budget was slated to meet, but we didn't because basically we have our meetings so quickly and there's so much time spent in negotiations that I don't think there was time to even think about having a budget meeting, truthfully.
Sure. Scheduling has been challenging in a lot of fronts, so totally understandable. We should try to have one before the next regular
Absolutely.
meeting,
Yeah.
which I think
It's
we have
2
to
weeks.
talk about. Yeah, but it's on the 11th. I don't think we figured out an alternate date yet for the Veterans Day holiday. We'll do that later. Okay. Any other subcommittee?
We're going to have our second meeting of the redrawing district committee at 1:30 on Friday.
Yes, Member Wall, the redrawing of the district map. 1:30 Friday.
Yes,
Is that already posted?
yes.
Awesome. You're so good. Thank you. And as with all of our subcommittee meetings, those are open for folks to join. Thank you. Any other updates? Hearing none? Yes, no?
Member Hollins is raising
Could
his
I
hand.
make a comment?
Member Hollins, go ahead,
I just wanted to mention about the collaborative.
please.
There's letter, Bill Dial, who's been the CEO, I don't know for how many years, maybe 6 or 8, is retiring December 31, and they're
Oh.
recruiting for someone new.
Thank you. for
Effective
that.
December 31. I don't know if we want to thank him or something. It's a hard job.
We
Sure.
should, because it is a hard job and he's really good at it.
I believe they
So we
have
can
an
talk-
interim through July 1st, so they will be searching, and the position, they're looking for the new person effective as of the start of the fiscal year. Bill has been a terrific support to Greenfield and a great collaborator, and I think one of his sort of legacies has been bringing the districts together and helping us focus on public education as not a competition sport, but as the best interests of all of our Commonwealth's children, and in this area in particular, and has really been a driver of helping us find cost-saving measures for our special education. And we've also taken advantage of the collaborative for our entire website redesign and hosting, professional development, anti-racism training, you name it. The collaborative is really a terrific value and a really, it's been a very responsive organization, and it's always been great to have school committee reps that bring information back from Greenfield there and vice versa. And Bill attends all of the superintendent's meetings of Franklin County and jointly with Hampshire County. So we have a lot of communication so that they're able to respond. So.
Thank you both for those updates. Yeah, that's a big shoes to fill for sure. Any other subcommittee information reports? I think we were probably done with that. Okay, so we'll go into our new business items. I actually would like to start
Chair, may I interrupt
sure.
you to let you know that you said you would open?
I did. I said I'd go back for public comment. Thank you. I forgot all about it.
Doug,
Yes.
if there's no one else that I see in there, so.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry about that, Doug. If you have a comment, is it Mr. Selwyn? Is that who we're talking about?
I think so.
I've been called worse.
Okay, great. Yep, I just wanted to make sure I had the right Doug.
Yeah.
Please, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, I won't need them. I wanted to say a couple of things. One, about the MCAS first. There was a joint meeting of the legislative education committees today down in Boston. So I'm not sure what came out of that, but I know they were pushing the offering the MCAS again to tremendous resistance from educators and families around the state. And I would want to strongly urge, there's no one who would look at taking a standardized test, which is kind of iffy to begin with, and say that it's reliable or valid in the midst of a pandemic. So there's nothing valuable that comes out of this in terms of educational value. There's enormous stress put on kids, put on educators, put on families around this. And I would urge the committee, and this is, sort of risky stuff, and I'm not on it, so I can say this without being at risk, to really put the kids front and center in terms of your decision about whether to go through with this. I would urge you to join with other districts around the state to say no, that the MCAS is not an appropriate thing to do in the middle of a pandemic. It provides no reliable information when kids are traumatized, when teachers are traumatized, when families are traumatized, to say, go take this test. There are other economic and political reasons behind this more than educational ones. So I would encourage you to reach out to other districts and see if there's any collaborative, cooperative way to say, no, thank you very much. So that's one thing. Secondly, I would ask about the superintendent search. Again, to urge you to find and make sure that you include in your list of must-haves somebody who has actual real experience in dealing with and addressing issues of racism and inequality, et cetera, and to make sure that the public is involved as much as possible, especially families who come from underrepresented groups, in the process of choosing a superintendent, so that it really does represent, the search really does represent the entire district, the entire range of people that we serve. I would say the same thing about the advisory committee meeting on Friday, to be absolutely as inclusive as possible in reaching out. And I know that Chair Wall has said that that was her intention. I'm really at the last meeting, so I'm really supportive of that and encouraging that to continue, so you really hear from the people who are most affected. When I looked at statistics about who is where, the last round of redistricting ended up with having the so-called most challenging kids evenly distributed between two of the schools, with Discovery School having many fewer of those quote unquote challenging kids. And I don't think that's what we want. So I'm hoping that there can be a process that really leads to equity across the district. And I'm done. Thank you.
Chair Poyetta, you're on mute.
Story of my life. Story of my pandemic life. Okay. Any further interest in public comment? Thank you, Doug, for that. I'm not hearing any other. Are you seeing some?
No, I just have something else on committees when we're done, seeing if there's anyone.
Oh,
interested in public
okay.
comment.
So you need to go back to committee reports?
If you don't mind, yeah, that'd
Please
be
go
great.
ahead.
Just, I don't know, Chair Prayati, if anyone has volunteered to be on the racial justice, racial equity.
Yes, I do have some volunteers. Thank you.
Great.
I have not yet gotten that off my to-do list. How about that?
All right, great.
It's on there though. And
Terrific.
yes, we'll be moving forward soon. Having the meetings every 2 weeks is hard. I feel like I can't get a lot of stuff done in between. I'm trying to aim for covering things in these special meetings that are more timely and not and then covering things that are part of our regular business process in the regular meeting. So I will definitely have an update for that meeting. And thank you for the reminder.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on to new business, and this is becoming a habit in these meetings. But I would actually like to start with a motion for item C on the agenda. I think we need to table that one for now or move it to our next meeting. If someone would make a motion to actually remove that item, I would appreciate it.
I'll do it in just okay.
That's a motion from Member Wall. Can you second, Member Johnson-Musad?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay, and we just don't have the right information to move forward with the discussion right now, so I'd feel more comfortable tackling it another time, and there's also a couple of things that we can do without having to bring it to the committee. Did you have a comment?
Would you clarify?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's Member Hollins. Yes, go ahead.
Would you clarify the topic you're talking about for those of us that don't have the agenda in front of us?
Item C under new business, the Kismaskis contract discussion. I'd like to move it to the next meeting.
Thank you.
But that's the reason. It's just, I think it's not
It
necessarily
didn't
in
have
the
the
right place
agenda.
at the right time. Okay. Any further discussion or questions about that? Okay, so we're going to vote to just move that, table it for the next meeting, move it to the next meeting. Member Johnson-Musad, if you would do a roll call vote.
Sure. Member Karen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom?
Yes.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Secretary Johnson-Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Prayati?
Yes.
Member Wall?
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegardner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you all. Now that we know that we can do that with a motion, it's like we have to do it at every meeting. I'm sorry, but these things are moving so fast right now. It's not, we're sometimes putting the cart before the horse with items on the agenda. So we'll go now to item A, which is the fiscal year 21 budget update. I don't know how you want to start this, Superintendent, if you want to give an overview or if Andy's going to do that.
I think Andy's on the line with us. I see him. Andy, did you want to begin
Yes,
with
I
an
am.
overview?
Sure.
Hi, Andy.
I can do that.
Welcome.
Hello,
Thank
everyone.
you.
So the governor has released an updated budget that is yet to then go through for approval from the legislature. So what you have here in your packet is the impact of the revised governor's budget as compared to what was put forward, presented, and voted on by the mayor's budget. We focused on the cherry sheet education components to it. So the underneath number one, you have the assessment, the cost side, where from the proposed budget and voted budget to what the governor has revised, you see there are two increases both in the choice and the charter sending assessment of numbers. Charter's going up just under $40,000 and choice is going up just under $128,687. Then we switch over to the revenue side. There is a decrease in the Chapter 70 from what was presented in the mayor's budget at the time to the revised governor's budget of $96,166 decrease, and also a decrease of $21,200 decrease in a charter reimbursement. So the overall impact on the cherry sheet side of educational assessments and aids is a negative impact of $286,014. Now, obviously, this still has to go through the legislature for their approval, but we figured it was good to give you an update as to what was presented and voted on by the city council from what the mayor presented and where it is that it stands now. As obviously is clear from this, and you probably all are aware, any aid from the Student Opportunities Act has been postponed. I mean, they're saying till next year, but fingers crossed that even holds true. So that's the impact from the cherry sheet side. Superintendent Harper, do you want me to continue on, or do you want to take on item 2 as far as what to go through? I can continue on if you'd like.
Well, I just want to see if the committee has any questions about that. Andy, thank you for bringing that information together. Andy and I took a look at this and wanted to simply present changes to revenue. And it really is, you know, as he's broken it down in terms of assessments costs that have been changed and revenue. And there is some room here for the city council's final, you know, any changes that they make and the committee to make changes. So there, and again, this is the governor's proposal, which still has to move through the legislature, as Andy has just said. So if there are questions, we'll take them on that part. Otherwise, we'll move next into possible actions that the committee may want to entertain. And again, these are all possible, knowing that this budget is still very much at play and that further changes are expected. Do you want to keep going, Andy?
Sure.
Oh, wait a minute. So, let me ask a question. This says potential school committee actions to consider. I wonder if it would be better for us to look at this at the same time as we're looking at the sheet that has the open position.
Sure, you can.
So further on in the packet for those following along at home, there is Greenfield open positions as of October 19, 2020. In between, there is a quote for a van. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Also, if you are asking for questions, would you clarify what type of questions on what?
So if you want to stop
on fiscal impact of the governor's budget, yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. Section 1 of the analysis from Andy. Are you good, Member Hollins? Do you have a question?
Yes, I had questions about the actual budget document, but I'll wait.
Okay, yeah, let's wait. Let's try to do it a little bit systematically. Thank you. I appreciate the patience.
So if I could just add one comment, Chair, I think the takeaway from this top section here, as you know, we've seen, is that we have a decrease of $286,000 to Greenfield's educational aid in these 4 different areas as a result of the mayor's budget. So section 2 is talking about what potential actions the committee may want to take relative to that. And as I said, knowing that that number may change. The document about vacant position is sort of supplementary to this. So in anticipation of the fluidity of the budget during COVID, we kept open a number of positions that the committee had voted, and we had the authority to fill them. But it became clear that there was going to be a statewide decline in revenue, that there was going to be unprecedented challenges, and actually FY22 was going to be even more challenging than FY21. And so as I've apprised the committee in the past, you know, while it's to all of our advantage to have key staff and key positions, we also have a financial responsibility not to exceed the budget and to make sure that as the revenue was so late coming in and not even knowing what the budget was going to be for so long, we were very careful not to overpromise to staff and say, you can count on this employment if in fact we didn't know solid budget numbers. So as the committee is aware, we committed to our Unit A and Unit C staff in order to start the year, but we kept open a number of positions that were either currently vacant or that had been proposed as new positions, and we remained cautious about any of those positions in order to get a better sense of the budget numbers. Andy, if you want to go ahead in section 2.
Thank you, Superintendent Harper. I think that's a helpful perspective. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, so then I have another question. I guess, so what is it, Jordana and Andy, that you're looking for us for tonight, from us for tonight? Because there is, based on just a little bit of information we have and not the full budget document in front of us, I'm not certain that we can make any educated decisions.
So,
So is it that you're just giving us information, you're not asking for us to decide anything?
yeah, I would say my thoughts, Member Ekstrom, is that this portion here, in conjunction as far as with as Superintendent Harper said, I'll say the addendum to this of the open positions really is informational, because ultimately this being general fund impact, the ultimate decision rests with the mayor as to how she, obviously with the finance team on the general government side, potentially want to look at what the impact of this and the other impact of the other things as it goes through the process, potentially of I'll say the general government revenue and assessment side of the cherry sheet on the unrestricted general government aid and everything. So that's, this portion here really is informational, and for just kind of letting everybody know that this is where, from our point of view on the educational side of things, these are things that, the committee can kind of keep in mind as the process goes along. And once we potentially hear back from the mayor, Liz Gilman, or however it is that they're going to take the overall impact of this, and if there is going to be any impact on the schools, then we can obviously have a more detailed, robust discussion as to what action the committee would like to take. Not to put it on the mayor's plate or Liz's plate, but that's...
Well, so then every time I hear something like that, and we all know me and I'm a little bit annoying, every time I hear something like that, I think, why the hell do we even bother with all this shit when the mayor's just going to decide what the mayor decides? God bless you, Mayor. That's not what I meant. But
language, and watch the language.
Sorry, my bad. My apologies. And so that's kind of always how I feel about it. At any rate, I'll mute myself.
Thank you, Member Ekstrom. We all understand your point. There's a lot of frustration around how this works, but I think the reality that we're talking about right now is this is the process. We need to, as we always do, try to work with the various parties involved to get to the right decision. So, Andy, I think you've kind of started to talk about section 2 here. Do you want
Correct.
to
Sure, I can
keep going?
I can continue on. No, I can
Thank
continue
you.
on. So these are, again, some considerations as once we there's the open positions, we can continue to keep them open. We can do I'll say the standard action whenever things are tight of cutting supply lines, and then also potentially eliminating any additional positions. For I'll say the little discretionary funds that are available, you could reduce those further. And then potentially the last consideration would be to impact anything as far as collective bargaining agreements or individual contracts, anything in there to see of whether you open them up again or any other addendum potentially to cover if there are going to be any negative impacts of whatever comes out of the legislature. You could do that. And then also there's the take no action and wait for the legislature to finalize the budget. And then the potential additional reserves that we have, which would, as stated, not have an impact on the general fund, but obviously an impact on the reserves.
Sure.
And even I would say, I would add, and I neglected to add the fourth of, and again, looking towards the mayor and understanding Member Ekstrom's concerns, whatever the city ultimately decides to do regarding this does play into that as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So,
Yeah.
what I'd like to, I hear, Mayor Wiedegartner, is that you? I will.
It is, and I will be ready to respond whenever you think that's appropriate.
I'm actually, thank you. And I'm trying to do something just to make sure we keep the discussion organized. Let's try for a motion based on the choices in number 2. And remember, this is discussion. This is so we can have an organized discussion. It doesn't mean this is necessarily where we settle on what we're going to do. But I would like to try to organize how we discuss this and not have anything get lost. So if a member is ready to make some sort of motion based on these choices or their own choice, I would be ready to hear it.
Comment?
We're trying for a motion, Member Hollins. We got to have it organized. Something as simple as I would entertain a motion just so we can have discussion to take no action now and to wait until the state has finalized their fiscal year 21 budget. Anyone want to make the motion or something similar? Just so we can have discussion. Someone want to make a different motion?
I'll make a different motion.
Please, Member Hollins, go ahead.
My motion is based on the fact that the Budget Committee hasn't reviewed the budget yet. So my motion is that the Budget Committee take this issue up and carefully discuss what's in the budget and what might be some modifications to the current budget.
Any second to Member Hollins' motion?
I'll second.
Second from Member Johnson Musad. And Susan Farber, do you have the wording that you need?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, discussion. Member Hollins, you were first, and then we'll move. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor Wiedegartner honestly was first, and then Member Hollins, it's you. She tried to go before we even had a motion. So Mayor Wiedegartner, then Member Hollins. Go ahead.
I'll just simply respond both to Andy's excellent presentation and also to item number 1, which is where I think we are under 2, so 2.1. Just to let you know, with regards to timing, the city of Greenfield will be cutting $370,000 from its general operating budget for this. So it's not as if we're not doing anything, and I don't want anyone to think we aren't. And that will go before the council next month's meeting. So
Mayor, can you give me that figure again?
370,000.
Thank you.
That will be before the council to discuss and decide. Looking at the options under, that's just as a point of information. We are not going to at any point in time ask the school committee and the superintendent to cut the budget without knowing that we will feel the pain as well. So with regard to item number 1, almost any one of these options here, and maybe more than one, are good options to take, and those deserve some discussion and where their potential impacts will be.
So you're talking specifically about item number 1 under item number 2. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
So the only one that I personally don't understand, so I'll wait for an explanation, is cut supply lines. I don't know if you mean cut ordering supplies or exactly what that means. So that deserves an explanation before I can begin to comment as school committee member and perhaps even as mayor on what that means. But all the others are certainly useful and are things that I and also Liz would probably recommend if we were asked directly. So I think the reason I'm here is because I can have insight into that. And I believe that is all I have to say with regard to this, except that I support, obviously, Member Hollins's approach to this, because I think the school committee needs to have their opportunity to look at the budget and see which of these 1A, B, A through E would be useful. So if Andy or the superintendent want to provide the whole committee with an explanation of what exactly cut supply lines means, because it means a whole different thing to me than I think is what it means to you. So that's all I want to say.
It truly is reducing what's available for ordering of consumable materials.
Okay.
So, and again, I'll say, regarding this, we're not going to balance the budget on cutting supply lines.
No.
Quite honestly, so it's just, it's a consideration to, should the school committee decide to, it's a consideration that could be taken, I would imagine, in conjunction with one or the others potentially, if indeed that's the direction they choose to go in.
Thanks, Andy. Let's go on to Member Hollins, please.
Thank you. The reason I made the motion is because we meet every 2 weeks and the committee has not reviewed the budget that I have in my packet that's prepared by TMS. And in that budget, there are some questions I would have before for me, cutting supplies until we know that the students who have to learn to read and write and do arithmetic have the supplies they need, the teachers do. That would be last for me. But for example, in the budget that I received, there's $90,000 for the principal of North Parish. I don't think we've ever approved $90,000 for the principal of North. I know it was somewhere around 40 as a part-time position. It's just here as transfer and adjustment in that line number 5. And we still have, at some point we voted to add a line item called SRO, and there's still 38,000 in a line item number. I don't remember the line item right now, but it's there for truant officer. We don't have a truant officer, so that, and part of looking at budget isn't just only, I should say, cut this, or sometimes it's looking about if there's a different way to do something. We have schools that aren't in session. We could talk about how many nurses we need when we're not in session, or how many we need when we have small schools, because with small schools, you're allowed to share principals, you're allowed to share nurses. I just think there needs to be some discussion before we start saying, let's cut this and that with the budget we were presented. And to check our policy priorities for literacy. I don't think that would take a long time if the budget subcommittee would meet. And also I'd like to say, in response to Susan's comment, I think the discussion is helpful because for many years we had a supplemental appropriation from the city. As we can tell from our discussion, everything's changing every minute or every other minute, and we don't know, this amount of money's up and this one's down and you need more for the police and less for the schools or something. But years we always went back to the city when people knew how much they had and how much they didn't spend for supplemental appropriation. And I think it's important to review that with the mayor, because that should stay on the table as a possibility. Anyway, I just feel bad we haven't been able to talk about the budget we're presented, what's in it first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions? Discussion?
Chair?
Yes, please, Superintendent Harper.
Okay,
Go
great.
ahead.
Just a couple quick notes. As we said earlier, these are broad principles. So in a broad way, we're just trying to make the committee cognizant of things that you may want to consider, broadly speaking. So I think at the last committee meeting, and as the chair noted, they're every 2 weeks, so it's a bit hard to anticipate exactly what business is going to occur between meetings because they're happening regularly. So there was a request for more information about vacant positions and also an analysis of the governor's budget. And so that's why this is being presented to you. Not that you have to take any specific action broadly on the budget, knowing that the state aid figures are going to continue changing, but really more for a basis of your understanding. And as you pointed out, Member Hollins, as a basis of the dialogue for communication with the city, the mayor, and the business office. There are some specific requests that we do want you to consider in a more timely way. But just broadly speaking, the idea of this is to let you know where we stand right now and what the committee may choose to do or not do. Just some specific notes. I'm not looking at the line for the principal at North Parish, but the way our budget is structured, there's generally a salary and then an FTE. So there's a sort of mathematical equation that goes across the line. So if somebody is making $10,000 a year and they're a full-time employee, the extension shows $10,000. If they're making $10,000 a year and they're a half-time employee, the extension shows that there's $5,000 in that line. So generally speaking, our budget shows in one place a salary as if they were a full-time employee and then an actual extension. So if there's any need to update that, but it's always been a part-time position, at least for the last many years. So there's generally that's how that is organized. The SRO funding, I think you noted that would be a good example of something. I know the public has been interested in moving that funding into a line that's more specific. And then I did want to talk a little bit about the vacant positions. Is this, Chair, is this an appropriate time to speak to that list, or do you want to stay on the items
Motion.
1 and 2?
I need a reminder of what our exact motion is before I can answer that. So Susan Farber, can you read for us Member Holland's motion that we're discussing?
Yes, that the budget subcommittee take this issue up and carefully discuss what's in the budget and what might be modifications to the current budget.
I think it's thank you, Susan Farber. I think it is totally appropriate to make those comments now, Superintendent. I think we're at a thorough enough place that let's just have the discussion before
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
And also, I fully support the budget subcommittee continuing to look at this in more depth. The full committee asked for a report on what is currently vacant. And so you have a list of vacant positions totaling about just over $600,000 in positions that are currently unfilled. Of those, the majority of them are positions that are either a new position, let's say a new student has moved in and we know that we need a paraprofessional for a new student because of their IEP, or somebody has left and we're actively filling it. So most of these are positions that there's some kind of transition, but we're actively filling it. However, there are at least 4 positions that are noted with the term budget freeze. And this isn't a general budget freeze that applies to everything. This doesn't mean that children can't get crayons and paper. It means that in these specific lines, we have intentionally not filled it and haven't actively been looking to fill it. And those apply to the assistant principal at Greenfield Middle School, the assistant principal at Greenfield High School. Both of those had 2 assistant principals last year, and we intentionally held them at only 1 assistant principal this year, even though 2 are in the budget. The pupil services assistant director, in the past there have been 2, and there has been thus far only 1 in that position. The admin assistant in the superintendent's office has been reduced, and that position has been intentionally, we've not been promoting or actively looking to fill that. There are other positions that are currently vacant that we're actively seeking, including the registrar, curriculum director, and many of these other much needed paraprofessional at the kindergarten level, for example. So unless it's noted, we're actively seeking to fill those positions. But the request was for all vacant position, which are of these 2 different types: intentionally vacant for budgetary purposes and vacant temporarily until we find the best candidate. I want to note that those 4 that I just noted, not knowing what the governor's budget would be, these were the ones that we held. the governor's budget reduced by $286,000 the educational aid to Greenfield. Those 4 that we have held are $280 and change $1,000. And so, you know, it is never a good thing when we're losing state aid to the city. But this is why we are being cautious with our spending and not overcommitting. I will say that if we are moving to in-person services, when I speak to the high school principal and the middle school principal, it is challenging to imagine students being in the buildings and providing services without these assistant principals. In the remote environment, folks are working hard to sort of take on extra duties. In the in-person situation, it would be hard to operate without them. So I want to keep drawing a distinction between the phases of our remote plan and the cost of staffing for those plans. And that was a key consideration. That I think the committee was very clear that the cost of staffing, according to the ratios in the state guidance, was prohibitive for us at the time that the remote plan was adopted in August. So that's just an important point of information. Finally, at the bottom of this, I was asked, I believe by member Wall.
May I ask a question?
I can't quite hear.
Let's
Is that
wait.
member Ekstrom?
And
Yeah.
it's member Ekstrom. Superintendent Harper, please finish
Okay,
what you're talking about and then the questions.
fine.
Thanks.
Sure. At the very bottom are some of the requests that came from committee members. I was asked for some high priority needs. And so of the list above, I've just indicated which are highest priority to fill right now in our current phase of the plan. And those actually include some things that weren't on the budget at the time because they couldn't be anticipated. We've included job descriptions for those, and we've talked about them at length at previous meetings. But one of them is a remote learning specialist. And, you know, we have every teacher in the district doing something quite new and learning a lot, but we have no one person whose job it is to support teachers in the newest technology update, to roll out professional development around remote learning, to troubleshoot with them. And there are a number of instances of really supportive families and sometimes kids cheering on teachers when the teacher has a tech glitch or something else. I mean, everyone's been terrific, but in a district of our size, having one staff member who's on the teacher contract or similarly situated to support this would be really appropriate and is an eligible use of the COVID funds that are coming to our district. So I would propose this as a one-year grant-funded position with the person remaining in the Unit A contract. They're not a supervisor. So the committee has a job description, and we've talked about that a lot, but this has really become clear that the scope of remote learning is really expansive. And even if we return to in-person learning tomorrow, some students will opt to remain remote. And even if we return to in-person learning fully tomorrow, there is a possibility that something outside our control could make us return to remote learning at some point. So I'm just going to ask that of everything that's before you tonight, this particular position is the only one that I would ask for your consideration specifically. And I think that's only because it might be the third or fourth meeting that it's come up. And we really do need the committee to either authorize the superintendent to go ahead with this, repurpose other funds, or to say there's not funding for it and to allow us to sort of focus our energies elsewhere. Fish or cut bait?
Superintendent Harper, I appreciate the overview. Member Ekstrom, I know you had a question. Why don't you go ahead?
Sorry, I have two screens on, couldn't get to my button. I have a couple of questions. The remote learning specialist, yes, we've talked about it a couple times. If we're going to be using grant funds, why would it have to be a Unit A teacher? Wouldn't that be sort of a contract position and we wouldn't need to have them be part of a union? I don't have my camera on, but you can see. But yeah, go ahead.
I can see your quizzical eyebrow.
Yeah.
It does not need to be a Unit A position. It could be an administrative position on an individual contract. However, I think somebody who's been teaching and knows our curriculum and is especially tech savvy would be a good fit for this type of role. In our district, we have had a lot of our technology teachers have done a lot of our professional development. Some of our schools have had sort of resident experts amongst their staff offer a lot of professional development. My thought would be to post this internally amongst our teachers for somebody who's really a whiz at this and is already familiar with all of the technology we're using and our colleagues. And that would be a very good value and also pretty seamless. I think you would have a higher cost if you posted it in a different type of position.
And so is it that you would, and I realize this has to be flushed out, and so is it that that person would continue to be a teacher and then have a stipend put on top of their teaching abilities? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, it could work that way. The main thing would be that they would not have a teaching load. So they would not be, this would be their full-time job, would be supporting all of the schools in the district with remote learning, providing professional development, staying up to date, rolling out information, so forth. There could be a family support component as well, but the primary job would be to support our district in implementing the remote learning.
Okay.
And you can read 2 thoughtful single-spaced description pages describing
yeah, I saw that. Thank you. Yeah. And I guess my other question is about the curriculum director. It says that you're interviewing. We haven't ever really spoken about hiring someone, and with your deciding to not seek an extension of your contract, we have had sort of informal discussions of hiring both a superintendent and assistant superintendent with a curriculum director piece. And so I'm just curious I'm curious what's going on. I see that it's grant funded, so I suspect that part of it would be sort of the COVID funding. If I'm incorrect, feel free to tell me. But that's sort of where I had sort of seen that position going, and so I'm curious about what's going on here in the interviewing process and all of those things.
So this is a position I think folks are aware we have been recruiting and interviewing for some time. It was paused temporarily during all of the COVID-related work, but there's really quite a need for it. It goes hand in hand with the other position, not because it has anything to do with being remote, but because there's a need to focus on teaching and learning and for the alignment between the schools. In particular, families experience this when their child goes from pre-K to elementary and then to the middle school. In the middle school, of course, all 3 of our schools come together. And so there's a great need for alignment amongst those schools. This is not anything to do with COVID funding. It is funded through Title I and Title IIA, which has to do with some of our instructional services and our professional development funding. And I believe it's $55,000 out of the general fund and another $25,000, something like that, out of the grant. So that's why it's partially grant funded. And a assistant superintendent generally would be more in the range of $125,000, sometimes closer to $140,000. So in terms of purely dollars and cents, I personally would be hard pressed to advocate for the higher salary figure on this position at this time, given the roughly $300,000 reduction in the governor's budget and the need for more specific support and help in the classrooms.
And is it that this has been posted and you said it was taken down, all those things. Are you actively interviewing, or is the district, can you rephrase that, actively interviewing, or is it that you're sort of looking around? I think sort of given our change of view with how having a new superintendent next year, I feel like that might be a discussion that the school committee might want to have amongst, I could be wrong, but it might be a larger discussion.
Well, I think that falls under section 2, option 1, 2, or 3, in terms of your budgetary approval. And that's why I'm kind of outlining some of the steps the committee could take.
Okay.
So it's a very odd time in late October to be restructuring the budget. And that's because of the extraordinary difference in this year's timeline because of the state aid coming so late due to COVID. And so I'm just trying to, it's a little like, I feel like we rebuild the budget every 3 months or every couple of months. And it's a lot of work because that means you're reassessing revenue, costs, needs, staffing over and over and over.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of moving pieces here. And so we're just trying to make you aware of the district's needs and how much they're shifting, and to keep that front and center as these budgetary decisions are made.
Okay. I feel like it's moving and shifting every week.
Yeah, I appreciate that discussion quite a bit.
You.
That's very helpful. So any other questions or comments? I have a few things, but I want other school committee members to go first. Any other school committee members?
Yes, I do.
Member Johnson-Musad, please go ahead.
I'm a little unclear about what the superintendent and the district need from the school committee on this. We have kind of a range of strategies that have been on offer. So you're looking for a specific direction, like give us a menu, we want 1, 3, or 4, or is it to authorize the administration to, to use any and all of these strategies? Or I'm just not entirely clear what our role is on this one.
May I respond?
No, my question is to the superintendent.
Okay.
Member Johnson, I believe that there's going to be a budget subcommittee meeting in short order. That's what it sounds like to me. And my understanding is that the subcommittee is going to look at this again, sort of soup to nuts. I don't see how the committee can take a definitive action right now without final state aid numbers. It is still a moving target, even though we're getting closer to knowing how it's going to shake out. Because this number could potentially go up. One of the big concerns just generally is that we received this sort of one-time COVID money from the federal government this year, and what we didn't receive was the recurring Student Opportunity Act money that was scheduled to come to Greenfield that looked a lot like $1.4 or $1.8 million to Greenfield, and then growing each year from there. So there's a need for state aid information that's very clear upon which to base our budget, and it does put the committee in a difficult position. As far as tonight, it would be very helpful to know if there is support for a grant-funded remote learning specialist position. Because there are grant funds available, and Andy, feel free to chime in here with any allowable funds that we could apply to this. That's something that we actually need to encumber before December. Some of the grants are only available through December, and we need to, sort of make hay while the sun shines. I'm full of analogies tonight. They're terrible, sorry. And we need a vote on that. If we're not going to do that, we need to figure out how to support our teachers in other ways. So that vote, I would appreciate any discussion on that particular position, knowing it's grant funded and doesn't have a lot of overall budget impact. And the last thing I'll note is that if you wanted to generally say, there should be no freezes, this is ridiculous, we've approved the budget, fill the positions. If the committee felt that way, we would go out and fill them tomorrow. If the committee felt like, just please do nothing until we've had a chance to vote, any of these broad guidance will be helpful to us. Otherwise, we're going to continue to use our best judgment.
Okay, I'll just speak a little bit just to say that it sounds like we are on the right track then in having with Member Hollins's motion. And then I guess, and I think I will definitely be making or supporting a motion about the remote learning specialist position when we're done with this business item.
Thank you, Member Johnson-Musad and Superintendent Harper. Other further discussion questions?
I would like to speak.
Mayor Wiedegartner, please go ahead.
Actually, I think all of us probably would like to hear Superintendent Hollins's motion one more time because as Member Johnson mentioned, it is separate from the discussion about the remote learning specialist. I don't want us to get confused.
Yep.
And,
did you have anything else other than that?
Yes, I do. If I'm looking at what I think her motion is about, we are somewhere between 2 potential school committee actions to consider. Dot 1, and we still have 2 and 3 to go, which is the problem of her motion. So there's definitely an argument to be made from this standpoint about take no action now, wait for the legislature to finalize the FY21 budget. As I said, we are not waiting at the city level for that. We are doing our cuts now. That's neither here nor there. I just want to make that clear. And they may or may not be done in concert with when the legislature finalizes the FY21 budget. There is still the option of number 3, which is authorize additional spending from reserves, no impact to the general fund. I think that deserves a full discussion because you do have reserves that for quite some time now, if I'm correct, don't always get spent. So now may be the time. So that's just my opinion on this discussion. Because I think under number 1, there are definitely things that could be done. I think Superintendent Harper makes a credible request for the remote learning specialist, and that deserves its own discussion as we've discussed. So I think, unfortunately, we are taking these one at a time. So I don't know if we get to number 2 or number 3.
We're not taking them one at a time. We just put a motion on the table so we could discuss. That's all. We'll vote on the motion once folks are done discussing and decide on a different motion.
Okay.
But you should look at the items under number 2 as options we could take as a school committee at any point. But we did not have, I won't start discussion without a motion. It's just the best way to organize the conversation. So that's what we've done. So I appreciate all your comments because you've gone over what each piece that is important to you. So that's helpful. That's super helpful. Do you have anything else, Mayor?
No, I do not.
Okay. I have a
comment.
Yes, please. Member Hollins, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just want to say that my discomfort is that we have never talked about how the budget, and I'm looking at column E, the revised budget has changed. Like there's 0 in the guards. Does that mean that even if we have children coming back to school, we won't have any crossing guards? I don't want the answer right now. It's just that we've never talked about this particular document to start talking about cutting it. And this afternoon, I got 3 emails about new positions. One is they were all based on current needs, 2 in technology for helping children with equipment, I think, and 1 for this position the superintendent has described. That's exactly the point. We're in a situation where we need some things we didn't need before, and we don't need some things that we thought we were going to need before. And that's why the discussion is needed to see not only new ideas of what we currently need, but things that we had in the budget that maybe we don't need because we're going to have fewer students in school. And that's why I think it's early right now to change without even knowing talking about these parts of the budget. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I'm getting a really bad echo from somewhere.
This is Member Karen.
Member Karen, please go ahead.
I'm the way I understood Susan's motion was that all of the other actions underneath there, reduction and all of those things, would be on hold until the budget committee could come back to us with a more clear picture, because I too am very uncomfortable making any cuts at the moment. I would feel more comfortable about the remote learning specialist position if I had a clearer picture of where the money was coming from. But I think we'll probably get that information as the night progresses. I think that that's like a very specific, I know it said it was grant funded, but some from the general fund, or maybe I misheard. I'm really uncomfortable making decisions without more clear picture. So in my mind, the answer is please do nothing. Budget subcommittee would meet in the next 2 weeks and give us a little bit more of a clear picture. That's what I'm interpreting the motion as. Please correct me if I'm wrong or have better clarification.
You remember, Karen, I'm seeing nodding from Member Hollins. For the first time ever, Member Hollins is on the same screen as me, so I can see her. So you need to get in the habit of talking when you have something
that
to
was
say.
that was the intent of the motion.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Member Karen, for clarifying.
More information before we start acting on a budget we've never discussed.
Yep. Any other further comments? Okay, so I just have a couple of things related to this. So just an interesting comment, because I think it's important. I did hear Commissioner Riley speaking about the Student Opportunity Act money and the COVID money that had come from the federal government to the state, and implying that because we were getting all this COVID money, it kind of equated the Student Opportunity Act money, which is the biggest bunch of malarkey I've heard in a very, very long time. And I just want people to know that that's what the state is trying to say about these funds. And then the second thing is, we can't be in a hurry when we don't know what the funding is. And it is important to take a better look as a budget subcommittee, as people have said, at the budget before we take any action. We're meeting every 2 weeks. There is not a rush. And now I am going to admit my ignorance a little bit on process, which I have no problem doing because I work in financial aid all day long, and I half the time have to ask what I've been doing, and I've been doing it for 15 years because it's so complicated. So my question is, the grant-funded remote learning specialist that is clearly needed, this is not a position that's under the purview of the school committee to hire. Why are we being asked permission to put it into the budget? Is it specifically only because it doesn't have its own line item already? I'm asking either Andy or the superintendent to clarify that for me. I'm sorry, you're talking, but I can't hear you. Sorry, thank you.
Are you asking why, for example, the remote learning specialist, if it's grant funded, would be in the budget?
Well, why do you have to ask permission? Why do you have to ask our permission? Like,
so in a way, we're kind of bringing more to the committee in a way than we might otherwise. And it's precisely because there's so many moving parts. Okay. Usually when a committee votes a budget, let's just wipe the slate for a minute and imagine that there's a state budget, there's a local budget, the committee has voted a bottom line, and there are positions, and we go out and fill them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I hate to make school sound simple, but it sounds kind of simple. And what we have right now is, as Member Ekstrom said, situation that's changing all the time. We've got a number of positions that we're intentionally keeping vacant, and committee members keep saying, what's the deal with all the vacant positions? And we want to sort of say to you, here's why we've kept them vacant. You're welcome to direct us to fill them, but we'll be, that's $300,000 of savings that we have managed to kind of try to prioritize what are based on our current needs. Member Hollins was talking earlier about current needs versus what's in the budget. And if we had filled all these positions simply because we were able to, we would be in a more difficult position.
That part today. I totally understand.
Yeah. We're coming to you and saying, we've kept these, but at the same time, we want to create a new position, and we believe we can use COVID funds, and we just want to know, is the school committee in support? Because it wasn't in the last budget that you voted, because we didn't have COVID and we didn't have remote learning.
That makes perfect sense to me now. I needed to make sure I was understanding the process. Its process is if I can't trace it back to the root of why we're talking about it, I have to ask. So then my next question is hopefully a simple one. The pandemic goes away, the grant funding goes away. Does the position stay?
I would propose that this be essentially a pilot. Let's hope that the pandemic goes away.
Right.
And in June, everyone's saying, gosh, thank goodness we don't need that position anymore. I think if we opened it up to the Teachers Association, maybe from Greenfield, maybe from other districts, that we would allow somebody to take a 1-year leave of absence, anticipating that it's temporary and that they would go back to the classroom when it's over. I think then it gives you a little time to see how it goes. And hopefully, like I said, we're back in person way before, we're talking about this position going away, but it's there as a support for those students that are still choosing to remain remote.
Got it. Thank you so much for the clarification. Okay, further discussion on this before we take a vote, and I will have Susan Farber read the motion before we take a vote. Hearing none. Susan Farber, would you be so kind as to read the motion on the table, please?
Yes. That the Budget Subcommittee take this issue up and carefully discuss what's in the budget and what might be modifications to the current budget.
Thank you. And Member Johnson-Musad, would you do a roll call vote for us, please?
Member Karen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom?
Yes.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Secretary Johnson-Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Poyetti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegardner?
Abstain.
The motion carries with one abstention.
Thank you. And it sounds like we are looking for another motion related to this move to approve or support, however you want to word it, a grant-funded remote learning specialist position for the district.
I'll make a motion.
Please, Member Johnson-Musad, go ahead.
I move to authorize the superintendent to hire a 1 FTE remote learning specialist per Unit A teacher's salary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Member Wall with the second. And let's discuss.
I'll speak to it. I just think it makes a lot of sense. The learning environment has changed completely overnight, and people need the expertise, and it sounds like there's a realistic way for funding it, and given the cuts, essentially given the reductions in budget due to deciding to freeze hiring on the other positions, it looks like there's a way to kind of make up the loss. So that's why I made the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I have a question or just a comment.
Please, Mayor Wiedegardner, go ahead.
I believe Superintendent Harper discussed the possibility of opening it up internally first. And I think very quickly towards the end, she discussed what would happen if someone internally took that position. So I simply want to know if someone that we are relying on in the classroom applied internally, which is totally fine. I have no problem with that. But was accepted, does that person's teaching job go away, and therefore for a short period of time, temporary leave of absence, I believe, or whatever it was called, that I believe that the superintendent discussed briefly towards the end. But does that now create a need to fill that position? It's a process discussion, and I just simply need, before I could vote, to understand what happens to that position if someone internally was hired.
I have a comment.
Okay,
Collins.
so I'm wondering first,
Superintendent was speaking.
I think that, yeah, that Superintendent Harper will respond to the mayor.
I was unmuted in one place, but not the other. It's a good question. Yes, if an employee internally moves to a different position, there's a bit of a chain reaction. It happens sometimes already if a paraprofessional steps in to substitute when a teacher's on leave, something like that, or a teacher steps up into an administrative position and so forth. So yes, you would have to potentially backfill. I say potentially because I don't know who might be interested or apply, but if it were somebody, I'm trying to scratch my brain for thinking of somebody that we might be able to do without filling immediately. But if we would likely fill their position, yes, a simple answer. If we could somehow pause filling their position just for savings and that didn't jeopardize services, we would look at that for additional cost savings. If there's a chance to not fill it, we would look at that. It's a classroom teacher, you're going to have to fill it.
Thank you for that clarification. Member Hollins, go ahead.
I support the superintendent making adjustments in staffing that meet the needs of our students and teachers. And I support all three proposals that came to us as school committee members. My concern is if we're setting a precedent, a superintendent has to make these adjustments. Someone mentioned that last time we how many people could have for a football game, which I just am worried that we're starting to micromanage. And if this is what the superintendent feels is needed, I appreciate the discussion, but I think the superintendent doesn't need us because we don't hire this position. I don't know. I think use the resources in the best way possible for what's needed and keep us advised. I'm just worried about setting a precedent on starting to act on positions under the superintendent's
Thank you, Member Hollins.
discretion. Thank you.
Superintendent Harper, do you want to respond to that? I think you kind of,
I would entertain a motion to just let the superintendent use her discretion to fill positions. That would make my job a lot easier.
Well, and that was kind of the same question.
Sorry, go ahead.
It was kind of the same question I asked previously,
Yes.
just worded slightly differently.
Yes, this position is not in the school committee approved budget. So the reason I'm bringing it to you is because we are going to continue to wait for the legislature to finalize a budget and or the city of Greenfield to finalize their budget. And that either of those processes will take some time. Whereas there is an immediate need, there was at the last several meetings, and we have tried to continue to bring forward the process. Folks asked for more information on funding, on position, on description, on survey data. So we've done those things. I appreciate the discretion thought. Had I had that a couple of months ago, I would have certainly filled this position at that point.
Well, I think we're just in a really different place where there's a lot of unknowns and it's hard to manage. And I think right now, more information about how the budget is going is better. That's my personal opinion. It's taken us a little bit to get through this agenda item, but I don't think it was time that was poorly spent. I think we've had a good discussion and there's a much better understanding from the whole school committee about where we're headed, but we also haven't made any giant decisions. So I fully support this motion, and I'll take any last comments or questions before we go to a vote.
Just a quick comment.
Please,
which
go
is
ahead, Glenn.
That there have been times in the past also when the superintendent has brought items to us which are under her purview, but wanted to kind of get that extra support from the school committee, and in those cases as well. I mean, I'm happy for the communication and for the times when you've requested those extra votes of support from us when it's going to, require resources or attention from you. I've been appreciative of that and appreciate this today.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so let's move to a vote on this.
Member Karen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Sorry, yes.
Member Hollins, Secretary Johnson Musad. I'm a yes. Chair Poyetty,
Yes.
Member Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegardner.
Abstain.
Motion carries with one abstention.
Thank you. Do we want to do any further motions under the fiscal year 21 budget update? Wonderful news. The silence is wonderful news. Let's move on to the reopening plan update, item B. And I'm assuming that Superintendent Harper, you'll walk us through this.
Okay. All right, so in your packet, you have a reopening plan update and phase 2 readiness report. Just a reminder for folks listening at home, we always love when people tune in and we make all our packets accessible. So if you haven't already found the packet, please take a look, gpsk12.org, go to the right-hand side, click on school committee, and then the materials and agendas are all at the top of the packet. So what we've done here is just try to summarize some of the many activities, and it is a summary, it's not exhaustive, of the ways that we are preparing and have been since last spring for students to be in person. The committee at the last meeting asked for this report as a way to help gauge what the committee could reasonably do within their scope of authority to bring students back to school, and of course in conjunction with the negotiations. So this report is brought forward in that spirit, and it sort of starts with our phase 1, a summary of where we've been. So phase 1 started back in August. It included some in-person meetings, for example, the before school started meetings with parents and guardians, which I shouldn't call preschool because it sounds like that's about the preschool, but I meant before school started, as in preschool. And then we have recently approved a start to in-person outdoor services. That's a new agreement. Member Johnson Musad or Ekstrom may want to comment on that further, but that's been a really important focus to be able to deliver in-person services. And at the same time, having started this evening talking about snow, we know that that is not a permanent solution. So the purpose of this report is really to talk about our readiness for phase 2, which is next. And we propose, we being administration, propose to the school committee that this should begin in November. At our last meeting 2 weeks ago, I used a target date of November 2nd. I think we can discuss when in November the committee feels may be appropriate. And so I'm just going to walk you through some of the steps that have been taken so that whenever the committee, together with the Teachers Association, reaches an agreement, that we are prepared and we want to welcome children back to the buildings. And we have been working around the clock. I really want to start by thanking our custodians. They've been unsung heroes. The folks at Central Maintenance, DPW, and of course our custodial and facilities manager, Alan Schmidt, and George over on the city side. So here are just a few of the ways that we have prepared. The photos are examples, not every single one. So there are hand sanitizer stations that have been purchased and installed, and underneath them are mats. And a custodian came up to me one day and said, you know, it's great that we have hand sanitizer, but it's going to eat through the floor and it's going to be a slip hazard unless we get these great slip-free mats underneath. And that he was right. So we put in slip-free mats underneath throughout. You're looking at Central Office and North Parish. We've purchased electrostatic disinfectant sprayers. This is important because when students are in the building or staff are in the building, this is part of the nightly disinfecting routine that is an essential component of deep cleaning the buildings due to COVID. This is all new equipment. It's quite expensive and very effective. The next has to do with signage and floor decals. These are 3 different examples of different types of signage and floor decals. On the left, you're looking at Four Corners, but this type of stand, pedestal stand with signage is in each of our buildings. This sign is reminding about face masks. In the middle, you're looking at the entrance of the high school with a sign asking folks to sign in and out in the entryway with their modified arrival foyer. And on the right, you're looking at the middle school. Again, these social distancing sort of signs are now, floor decals, if you will, are throughout all of our buildings across the district, helping folks remember to keep their space and follow those social distancing guidelines even indoors. In the buildings that we know we'll be using in phase 2, we've purchased additional HEPA air filters. So we want to ensure that the quality indoors of the air is of good quality and is being scrubbed, as it were. So we have purchased additional air filters. This might be above and beyond. We felt that it was a good step, and we're using those as the results come in to deploy them where they're needed most. Wanted to talk briefly about the HVAC assessments and to give a status update. We were hoping to have a new report for you tonight. The testing that was scheduled for yesterday wasn't able to be completed on Monday because it was an additional test that we had scheduled in, but they are doing additional testing on Thursday and Friday. I think this is the 3rd or 4th set of testing that will be done in Greenfield. So we get little reports that come from our commissioning agent, and we're working with Nexus Consulting. They're licensed to do this type of work, and they're expert in it. And we get reports that detail the air changes per hour, outdoor air, and any concerns that are noted. And then central maintenance, the custodians, our facilities crew have been going back in and doing repairs. As we talked about last time, the example of an exhaust fan that just the motor wasn't working properly, and so that has parts being ordered and then making replacements and repairs as necessary, with additional retesting before we would return students to the building. So we're looking for adequate air changes per hour, in addition to box fans and negative pressure in the rooms. And these standards are through the Department of Ed guidance, as well as through a number of outside studies and agencies on how to make the rooms safe and appropriate for students and staff. And I was hearing in a call with the commissioner today talking about between air filters and just air changes per hour coming through, there's reported to be a 90% reduction in any harm through those 2 things alone. Plexiglass barriers, you're looking here at Ms. Dossel from Four Corners. This is an example of a sort of administrative area that's been set up and installed at all of the entrances. And then down below, this is a prototype that we actually had made working with Greenfield Glass locally. And we asked them to create a divider like this for some of our younger students so that they could still engage in closer work at our tables and sort of see one another and engage in small group learning with a teacher sitting at a table. So you could seat 4 at this distance and then be able to sanitize the plexiglass in between, of course, with students wearing masks. We've talked a lot about the tents, the power, and the Wi-Fi, and so we really wanted to just highlight and note that that is available to us as long as the weather does hold. And of course, with thanks to GCET and City and Rec Department and our own custodial staff. And those are very high quality picnic tables and things that will be available long past when the tents are no longer in use. Some of the sort of protocols that have been reached, this may seem small, but they're not at all. I would like to thank our lead nurse, Pam Owen, for her work, as well as the Board of Health and all of the school nurses in particular. These were all approved through our Teachers Association, but with a lot of work from our nursing staff. Hand washing protocol, social distancing protocol, the stay home when sick protocol, and the mask wearing protocol have all been approved. So those are ready to go, and those are the guidelines we would follow And then we've digitized the health screening form. So for any students, when they do return in person, they would fill out a simple Google form with just an update to how their children are doing vis-a-vis any symptoms before they come to school each day. And then the last note is about PPE. Back when COVID started, I don't think anybody had heard the phrase PPE in general use, personal protective equipment. So we have ordered GPS masks. Alan Schmidt is here modeling one of our GPS Green Wave logo masks, and we've received those. So there are youth sizes and adult sizes, and then different styles. So those are available. Many staff have picked theirs up, and they would be available for students to each have one or two, depending on which size that they and style they like, in addition to backup supply of surgical masks and disposable masks, face shields, gowns, gloves, N95 masks as appropriate. For example, our nurses require N95 masks if they were in a potential exposure situation, whereas on a day-to-day basis, the surgical mask or a cloth mask is appropriate. So those are some of our readiness activities, and we set that forward knowing that we believe that our students would be well served by coming back to school when the committee feels it's appropriate, moving through the next phases of our plan. And there are still some components that need to be addressed, such as staff with medical concerns about being in person. But we do need, the, it's sort of a bit of a circular in that the school committee needs to indicate that it's prepared to move to the next phase for us to be able to ready for that phase. So we are bringing this forward to the committee for your discussion tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent Harper. So it sounds like we could start the discussion with a motion to approve a move to phase 2. And Superintendent Harper, does that sound right? And are you looking for a specific date from us?
This is a great question.
Could we say like move to phase 2 in early November? Could we say we authorize a move to phase 2 as on a timeline determined by the superintendent? How would you like it phrased?
Well, I never like to represent what the Teachers Association would say because
understood.
Because that's not my place.
It's an awkward question. No, I get it.
What I would say is that the committee can authorize the negotiating committee. You can also use executive session if you want to talk more about strategy, but I think this is totally appropriate publicly. The committee can indicate what it wants those of us that are negotiating on behalf of the committee to go with as a target start date.
Okay.
So the committee might like to have as a target start date November 9th.
Okay.
So that we could, those of us that are negotiating could go back and say the committee has asked us to begin phase 2 on such and such a date and come back to you with the results of that negotiation.
Thank you. So let's try a motion based on that information. Does anyone want to try it besides me? I don't mind.
I'll do it.
Go ahead. I don't know who that was, but go ahead. As long as you're a school committee member, of course.
Member Ekstrom.
Member Ekstrom, go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that the school committee authorize the superintendent to move the, geez, I got all involved. Move into phase 2 of our 4-phase plan, provided that all necessary precautions are taken to ensure safety, inclusive of HVAC appropriate levels.
Do we want
to,
and do we want the motion to say something about authorizing authorizing negotiations? to that effect with the teachers union? It sounds like that would be more helpful, for lack of a better word. I'm looking for some guidance.
Jordana, you can chime in on that, but I don't think necessarily that needs to be included. I just think it seems to me that it just needs to be that the school committee makes a motion to move into phase 2 with an expected, maybe I'm making a different motion. Motion to move into phase 2 with an expected start date of November 9th. Period.
That really simplified it quite a bit. I'm wondering if, Susan Farber, if you could use what was just uttered as a summary and now appears to be better than the original motion.
If Member Ekstrom could repeat that, I did not get it.
School committee is proposing a move into phase 2 starting or beginning on November 9th.
Great, thank you.
Chair, I would, I'm sorry if somebody else is going, I can't quite tell.
Nope, go ahead.
I would say that this will need to be bargained. So those school committee members that are representing the school committee will need to bargain it, whether that's in the motion or not. So recognizing that this vote of the committee indicates the committee's intent, and there will be further negotiations on it.
Yeah, absolutely. My intent was that. Actually, I intentionally left it a little bit vague.
Okay.
At any rate, we need a second to actually talk about it.
We need a second. Thank you. Any second on that?
Second.
From Member Wall. And everyone can hear me okay? My screen has gone a little strange. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great.
I have some questions.
We'll move to discussion. Go ahead, Member Johnson-Musad.
Superintendent Harper, thanks for the report. I have a few questions. My understanding of the science is that what people have been learning is that the primary vector of transmission is in the air, but yet, you know, our schools and many institutions are involved in these kind of deep cleaning. Is there any conversation with other superintendents or other places about, you know, these very expensive processes that we're doing, and to what extent do they actually protect children and staff, or are we engaged in some kind of coronavirus security theater?
Thank you for the question. I think everyone's interest is in balancing health and safety of students and staff with reasonableness and affordability, and making sure that we are implementing something that works, that is evidence-based. What I can say is that there's a lot of evidence that masks are a very effective reduction. And that wearing masks is, from every expert that I've heard on the topic, extremely important. That fresh air is tremendously important, and that distance is tremendously important. All of the CDC guidance, including hand washing and vigilance for symptoms, is what we've based our protocols off of. I believe there is good science behind everything we've done, but it is emerging. And so if you were to look back on where we are, in a year, you might say, sure, maybe you didn't need to wipe down desks in between use as much. But I think at this point, to Member Ekstrom's earlier comment, we're really looking to take all possible precautions in order to bring students back. I think because we aren't necessarily the health experts, but we're implementing the health guidance. We're just trying to do everything within our power that is available to us. And I think there's a lot of, hopefully we're trying to model a lot of common sense and not fear, but confidence and common sense.
Great, thank you. I'll just also make a comment that I support the motion, and as one of the members of the negotiating team, I think it will be useful to us to have that sense of the committee's interest and timeline in our negotiations.
Chair, I wonder if you might allow me to read out loud what phase 2 means so that we're all a little bit more clear on that.
Member Ekstrom, what a wonderful idea. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm reading directly from the document that was produced that discusses each of the phases. Phase 2 is remote learning plus high needs learners. Remote learning plus high needs learners. Phase 2 includes all services in Phase 1, which was, as a reminder, everyone being online and our high needs learners being outside to receive services. That has not happened. And there's also been an opportunity for people to go on site, say if they were willing to go to someone's home and do some education there outside. That has not happened either, but that is an option. So that would be phase 1. This is phase 2. High needs learners return for in-person instruction. Students attend full-time or on a cohort model, depending on social distancing guidelines, and in parens, space available basis. High needs learners include 1. Students enrolled in a substantially separate special education program. Beginning English learners, WIDA 1 and 2, which I'm sure the superintendent has more knowledge on and can explain. Consideration for other high need students, example being WIDA 3 and 4, other students with disabilities, homeless students, for additional in-person students. Students in this model will attend on a space available basis in order to meet social distancing guidelines with frequency as determined by the team. This model is staffing dependent. That's the end.
Okay, thank you for reading that. That's helpful to understand. Other questions, discussion, comments on the motion?
The mayor has questions.
Please, Mayor Wiedegardner, go ahead.
So I may have missed it, but I want to make sure that this is intended for all schools to open on for all the high needs learners, so separately. So elementary schools will open, high schools will open.
This would be a district-wide motion.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good to know.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
It has a specific date on it, so I want to make sure that whatever we do tonight is made in concert with what the health department is going to recommend going forward. It has been the case in the past, so I'm a little uncomfortable with a specific date for a variety of reasons. We have seen an uptick. So I'm fine with it happening in November. I think it's very important that in-person learning go forward if it can safely and according to health directives. So I would hate to see us open too early in November when we might be able to open, might better be able to open a little bit later, but that's just my caution to you. If we decide to do it, and we are intentionally intending for it to go on throughout the year, or at least until it becomes impossible to happen, some outside learning, do our tents that we've ordered have sides on them to make it more able to happen in a healthy and smart way? Those are questions. They are not comments, other than perhaps to be mindful of the health department's role in this, because at the end of the day, they will control whether we can do this or not.
Thank you.
Chair, could I
go ahead?
Could I
please.
respond?
Please.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you so much for pointing that out. Absolutely, the health department needs to be front and center. I didn't specifically call that out, although our school nurses, lead nurse, health department are very much in communication, and there are regular meetings, which I'm happy to participate in whenever my schedule allows it. So there's regular communication happening, and we absolutely would need to do this in consultation with them. So thank you for mentioning that. As far as the tents, there were so many steps involved in these tents, which included inspection by Mark Snow. And the sides were not put on in sort of on purpose to allow for appropriate egress, handicap accessibility, movement, social distancing, airflow. However, depending on, how we go, I could certainly look into whether we could make them more weatherproof as we go a little bit later into the season as well. You get pretty quickly into needing heaters and things like that. But I could certainly look into that if the weather is not if we're not in nor'easter weather with a lot of snowfall, you may be able to extend that. And we did discuss that with our tent vendor, that it's a bit weather dependent past the end of November.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Or Mayor Wiedegartner, do you want to follow up?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Other questions or comments from the school committee? Hearing none, it sounds like we can move to a vote, and I would ask that Susan Farber, could you please read the motion that we're going to vote on?
Yes. The motion is that the school committee authorize moving into phase 2 beginning on November 9th.
Thank you. And Member Johnson-Musad, would you do a roll call vote, please?
I will. Member Karen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yes.
Member Hollins,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson-Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Poyetti,
Yes.
Member Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegartner.
Abstain.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all. So that is hopefully helpful for planning and negotiating. And let's actually move on to, we've in our next, we're good with this, right? We can move on to the next agenda item. Yes, okay. Cooperation with neighboring school districts. We've tabled item C, we're on to item D. Superintendent Harper, please.
I think this came up out of the minutes from a discussion of cooperation with Leiden. I think in general, this is something that I touched on this earlier in our discussion about the collaborative. I think there's been some really good communication and collaboration between districts in Franklin County and beyond. And given the unique challenges, I just want to raise ways that we might collaborate with neighboring districts. We are all facing some of the same challenges around enrollment. Kindergarten enrollment across the state was less this year due to COVID. So there's some legislative advocacy around what this is going to mean for next year's budget. If children weren't enrolled on October 1st this year and decided instead to take a gap year, and next year's budget is based on how many children were enrolled this year, that's a problem that Greenfield and every other district across the state are going to face. Likewise, homeschooling increased because of the conditions around COVID and people being home and making different decisions than they might typically do. So these are kind of some of the unique challenges that continuing to partner with neighboring districts may be very worthwhile. Again, this is simply, there's no specific agenda item except to discuss and to continue to remind the committee that we're looking for ways to collaborate. There have been conversations about regionalizing in the past. I think about a decade ago, there was a conversation about cost sharing of superintendents. You're in the middle of a superintendent search. You could consider that. There's a good way. You could pitch yourself as anyway, there's some ideas there. I'll editorialize another time.
Thank you. So you're not necessarily looking for a specific motion here. Just wanted to bring it up. So I would love to hear folks, any comments or questions from school committee members on this topic. I think it's an important thing to kind of keep front and center as we look to identify ways to control costs, to manage our resources smarter. I think it's something we should keep front and center.
There are lots of simple things like the FERCog has been arranging some of the ordering of large purchases. So it's sort of a co-op bid. Many different districts can pool some of our face masks and PPE supplies we ordered in that way. The COG kept calling us and say, really, you want that many face masks? Yes, really. And we got a great discount by ordering it that way. So sort of trying to think of innovative ways to collaborate, and there may be other positions that are similar cost sharing. So just want to keep in mind, especially as the budget subcommittee looks at the budget, that I think that's regional cost sharing and cooperation with neighboring districts, particularly around school choice, are really important.
Thank you.
Mayor
Rita Gardner. Yes, it looks like you have a comment. Go ahead.
I would definitely like to speak to this. This is really, it's a good issue to bring up. It is precisely the wrong time. It is something that we should be thinking about. It is worthy of a broader discussion as the city goes forward, specifically if your mention is with regards to Leiden, which is the obvious more contiguous town to be discussing it for. So it is absolutely relative to the schools, but it is absolutely relative to the city of Greenfield as well, and to the town of Leiden. So I would respectfully say this is not particularly the right time to begin this discussion, given the situation we're in. It would be important to perhaps discuss it at some point before we have to produce a budget for FY22. But it is, given the fact that we are going to enter into a superintendent search, it's nice to have this put forward to us, but it is truly not the right time to discuss it at length. That is my comment for this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Whitaker. Sounds like you're specifically talking about regionalization.
It involves regionalization, and it involves other aspects that would affect the city that are not necessarily related to the schools. They are
what I heard
they are
more
tangentially related to the school.
Sure. And what I'm hearing was more about, perhaps my thought was to have at the next collaborative meeting to actually have member Hollins, or maybe even before that, if they have an email distribution list or something, discuss with the collaborative on how we can improve sharing of resources. And maybe also we can look into what additional things the FERCog can do for us. But I agree with you in terms of the regionalization discussion. This is not the time to start it. And no one is talking about annexing Leiden right now. That's for sure.
No, and it might be also very appropriate to a school city meeting going forward.
Sure, thank you. Other questions, comments, discussion on this topic?
Comment from Hollins?
Please, go ahead.
I just have a question. I don't, there's an echo, I don't know from where. I don't think, I support what the mayor just said completely about regionalizing. I don't think this is a time for it. I don't know if I'd support it anyway, because it doesn't end up anything. But I don't think you have to always regionalize in order to share a position. And I was wondering if it's ever, usually all the focus I'm aware of is on business services. You know, does it matter who does payroll? Can there be one payroll center for multiple districts or something of that sort? But I was wondering if there's been any discussion about a staffed curriculum office with someone who's a curriculum director and a grants and an administrative assistant, because generally my experience is when you're doing curriculum, let's say on social studies, you bring in people to talk about social studies, you review the literature on social studies, you review the materials on social studies, and it doesn't have to be only one district doing that at a time. People can come together. I think all the small districts struggle to have a curriculum, somebody who's consulting and bringing in resources and facilitating discussions. Has there been any discussion? It's probably about a $200,000 office if it's staffed, sharing it and among multiple districts so it isn't cost prohibitive for anyone, but the topics of curriculum can come up and then people can go back and do what they want in their districts. I've never heard that considered, actually, and that's my comment.
Member Hollins, do you think, in your knowledge of the collaborative, or the superintendent could certainly respond as well, do you think that's something they might entertain a discussion about?
I don't know if they would enter. I don't know the answer, but I know if you look at New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine, it isn't unusual to find 5 or 6 small districts that are sharing a curriculum director. And, it's just something I've had experience with. And I wonder, we're in the same kind of region, a lot of little small schools and districts, and none can really afford to staff a curriculum office. And could it be shared? And the way that would work in the old days of the early collaboratives is the larger district would take on the staff and other people would pay a portion, and there'd be a schedule and people would have shared in-service and discussion. I don't know. Maybe it's something new to consider. Maybe not.
Thank you. Thank you. Superintendent Harper, please go ahead.
Well, I do think that the collaborative could play a role in this, and does, as it relates to professional development, as an example. The collaborative being a tremendous resource for us and a number of area districts. And you can sort of pick and choose in an a la carte kind of way with experts that are most what you're looking for. I can't speak to Vermont and New Hampshire, but I will say that this has been explored. A couple of years back, we discussed it, and sometimes things have a time and a moment, and so I'm happy to take this up again. But there was a bit of a concern about, sort of like what's in the secret sauce. So if you were talking with another district and sharing your curriculum director, it's a bit of the trading recipes. And school choice has made school districts a bit competitive with one another. So the curriculum director role in particular has a lot to do with the instructional direction and the sort of proprietary nature. Being that we're searching for this position, I think it's a natural question to ask. But that was something that came up at least a couple of years ago, where even if you want to share with other districts and want to collaborate, the nature of the work that a particular district does is very specific to their textbooks, their assessments, whether they're a Mac or a PC district, the technology that they have, the sort of peculiarities of their regional district, like do you have to drive a lot between the buildings, or is it all, there's just any number of things that affect how you deliver instruction that sort of takes on a flavor. And in the past, first of all, it's a big job, and so there wasn't like a lot of time left over, and folks felt to some extent that they were sort of in deep focus on their particular needs. I'm happy to resurface it and see if there's a particular need amongst other districts, if there's interest from other members of the committee.
Thank you. And thank you, Member Hollins, for the thoughts and the question. Any other discussion on this? Member Johnson-Musad, go ahead. Everybody who's raising their hand is on my screen tonight. I don't know what's going on.
Well, we have a much smaller number of people on the screen.
I guess that's what it is. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's just a thought that it seems like COVID has kind of moved us into, ordering supplies through the COG, and just wondering if there might be opportunities through the COG with other school districts for other types of supplies that might be purchased collectively, like copy paper or whatever. So just wondering if that's something we might explore.
That's been explored.
So the superintendent's speaking, but we can't hear her.
I unmuted in the other place, but not the other one. We've had some conversations with the COG about ways we can expand cost-saving measures, and I will circle back to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Member Hollins, yes.
I had one other thought
Sure.
on this subject, and it has to do with another area where it seems to me small districts struggle to fund, and that's in recruitment and induction and orientation of personnel. If we want to have more racial diversity, it takes outreach, not just outreach in the local paper or the local email service, but really cross-country outreach to try and recruit people to come into rural Franklin County from other locations that are more diverse. And would there be any interest in some shared, it doesn't always have to be a full-time person, it could just be a consultant that's recruiting in staff, because there are job fairs all over at colleges. And in the old days, people actually traveled sometimes to other states to try and recruit in, but that's another area. I don't think we'll get more diverse just searching your own homeland. And I don't know if other towns would be interested in some shared outreach for staff.
Thank you.
Personnel.
Another interesting idea. Thank you. So I think it's a great discussion to have occasionally, and we'll have to keep putting this on the agenda so we can share ideas, especially as we embark on superintendent search and try to dig ourselves out of the COVID hole, for lack of a better term. Anything further on this before we move on? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. There's no vote to be had. So we actually do need to call an executive session this evening. So I will just read the reasons, and then we'll take a motion to open the executive session. We are not voting on anything in that session, so we will close this public session before we retire to our executive session boardroom. Okay, executive session will be called Massachusetts General Ledger C30A, subsection 21, exemptions number 2 and 3, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. And exemption 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair does declare. I do declare. So a motion to open the executive session, please.
So
So
moved.
I heard Member Johnson-Musad. We'll get Member Ekstrom for the second on that, and a roll call vote, please.
Member Karen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yes.
Member Hollins,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson-Musad. I'm a yes. Chair Prayati,
Yes.
Member Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegardner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Wonderful. So now I'll take a motion to adjourn the public session, please.
So moved.
I heard Member Wall.
Motion to adjourn the public
and
session
it
at
looks like-
8:23 p.m.
Okay, Member Hollins,
Second.
and I'll have the second from whoever just said that, maybe Member Ekstrom. I'm not sure. Let's do a roll call vote, please.
I have a discussion.
Sure, go ahead.
My watch says 8:18
Oh, gosh.
p.m.
Sometime after 8, sometime before 9. Let's just do the roll call vote, please.
Member Karen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yeah.
Member Hollins,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson-Musad. I'm a yes. Chair Prayati,
Yes.
Member Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegardner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so we are adjourned sometime after 8 and before 9, which I so declared at the beginning of the meeting. We will move to executive session. I will give you all a 5-minute break. Thank you. Have a